gosh, I don't know where to start. Watching those videos, I think my favorite quote was, the most important part of leadership is delegating. I kind of like that. My definition of leadership goes way, way back, which is the most important thing about leadership is having followers. Easier said than done, by the way. If you have followers, then by definition, you're going to be a leader. It is great to be here, and I must say I've read a lot about this amazing place, but to see it in action is a whole different story. And not only is the school amazing, but the city's amazing, and I have a very close connection to Berlin, which I'll tell you. But first I want to say thank you to Michael. Well, what a force you've been, and we had lunch, a very nice lunch, a year ago in London, and I got a sample of what Michael's all about. So, actually in just a very short time, Michael's become, a bit of a mentor to me. And he always gives me amazing advice, really invaluable advice. And, just this morning I was getting a little nervous because, gosh, what an impressive group this is, starting with our graduates. And I just didn't, wasn't sure what to say, So I asked Michael, I said, what can I really say? It's such an impressive group. And he says, he looks very serious sometimes, and he looked me in the eye and said, Bill, don't try to be intelligent, thoughtful, or charming. Instead, just be yourself. So that inspired me to write a few comments down. And Michael, with Sebastian, is Sebastian still here? You had this amazing vision, and wow, you're pulling it off. You're actually making it happen, which is pretty cool. And Michael, you are the dancing man. No one recognized him. He was the dancing man in that video, and we all follow Michael. And congratulations, Michael, to you and Sebastian for pulling this off after 5 years. Amazing. And I also want to say thank you to Clark. Where are you, Clark? For getting me completely smashed last night. He's also an impressive creative leader. Very impressive, just like Michael and Sebastian. And, you took multitasking last night to a new level, I must say. You were cooking, you were serving, you were hosting, and you were pouring wine. And it was Greek wine, by the way. And I'm paying the price today. It reminded me of Winston Churchill, who said, I've taken much more out of alcohol than alcohol's taken out of me. I'm not so sure right now. The last thing I remember is Clark saying, we're going to save the euro by drinking this wine. It reminded me of when I was with Elton John a few months back, and it reminded me that he launched MTV Europe in Amsterdam many, many years ago in 1987. And he said, that party was so good, I don't remember it. And true story, he became sober the next day. So occasionally MTV does some good things. He's been sober ever since. So, following all the speakers, and Julianne, you were terrific, thank you. And David as well, where are you, David? And of course, Michael, it's a bit daunting, I must say. I'm not used to it. But then I was reminded that Jimi Hendrix once opened for the Monkees. So, I'm the Monkees, by the way, just so you're not confusing. And, for those of you who are a bit younger, that's just kind of like U2 opening up for Spice Girls. So, there is precedent, and, it's just a great honor to be here with you. It really is. And look at your faces, and wow, it's pretty incredible. So congratulations. Congratulations to you. Now, Berlin, for me, is a very special place, and I'm going to explain why. It's, of course, the center of influence, and at MTV, we like to say it's a center of cool. And this school is definitely a cool place. You are all cool by being here, and this school is very, very cool. And, Michael and Sebastian and all the rest are responsible for that. And along with Shanghai, Tokyo, and New York, by the way, I want to be in that boot camp. It's pretty cool as well. But, the mission, I was quite taken with the mission. You take creative and you teach them CEO skills, and boom, they become CEO. Or managers, or whatever. I've always thought that it's much easier to teach a creative executive CEO skills than the reverse. It's actually, I think, much more difficult to teach a CEO creative skills. So you've got a tremendous advantage already, without being spooked by accounting or whatever. And I would argue that to be a successful CEO now, you have to be creative. And if you're not creative, you will not be a successful CEO. So Berlin, Berlin is where I had, my wife and I had our first date. She's German. But the city also has connected a lot of dots with me because I have an unusual career path, I suppose. Long ago, I once commanded nuclear missiles. I'm sorry. Don't try this at home. It was part of Europe, NATO, and it was during the Cold War. So I commanded these nuclear missiles for, 4 years. And then in another time in my life, in 1989, I came back and I commanded another type of unit, which was MTV, a little bit different. And early on, and I'm convinced that when you take on a new role, you make your most important decisions in the first 90 days. So in the first 90 days, I made what I thought at the time was a creative decision. And Europe had very little cable infrastructure, so you couldn't launch a TV channel, obviously, without distribution. So I convinced my board to invest $10 million, which at the time was a big chunk of change, in a new satellite, which was the first KU satellite. And what did that mean? It meant at the time you could buy a 60-centimeter dish, which was much smaller than before, it was 1.5 meters. And suddenly, with that 60-centimeter dish, you could receive MTV. So individual homes began all across Europe buying these dishes. And then I made another decision, which in the end was creative, I think, and also somewhat risky at the time, which is I decided to flip the switch and put it in a clear. There was no encryption of the signal. So not only if you bought a dish did you get MTV, but you didn't have to pay for it. So suddenly in the months of 1989, and I did this in the January of 1989, all the countries began changing. Now, tongue-in-cheek, of course, but we were very much there for all these amazing changes starting in January of 1989. And remember, this is the Iron Curtain, and there's no cell phones, there's no internet, there's not even really decent TV. So by suddenly throwing a signal over the Iron Curtain, we were exposing whole nations, really, and groups of people with something they've never seen before. And to this day, I'm convinced it was not so much about the programming, although the music video and music was irreverent and edgy, it was more about the commercials, because suddenly you could see how the other side was living in the quality of life through the commercials. Now, I'm here to say MTV did not bring the wall down, please. But, we were there, and one by one, all the countries changed, and it culminated for me on November 9th, 1989. I was in East Berlin by happenstance to give a speech, and conditional on giving that speech, I said, I want to have MTV hooked up in all the hotels. So it took us a couple months to do it, a lot of effort, a lot of work, and we did it. We did it, and we flipped the switch, and suddenly MTV was in East Berlin in Tuesday of that week, and I was supposed to meet the Politburo, and no one showed up because they had all resigned. And within an hour of when we hooked up MTV, the Politburo resigned, and 48 hours later, the wall came down. We didn't bring it down. But technology did play a role, and you can credit the Pope going to Poland, perhaps, Hungary lowering the borders. I think probably most importantly, Gorbachev ordering the soldiers, and he was the commander of the Warsaw Pact soldiers because he was heading up Soviet Union. So therefore, the East German soldiers did not fire. So, and we got Thomas over here who works closely with Gorbachev, and you can ask him all these questions right there. Raise your hand, Thomas. He's very, very closely tied to Gorbachev. So the analogy that I have for all this is a little bit the Arab Spring, because we talk about the Arab Spring, Facebook and Twitter, and by the way, Al Jazeera probably was even more influential, I think, than Twitter or Facebook. So we were a little bit like the Arab Spring in 1989, and we were breaking down barriers as a business, and this symbolized really our unique ability to connect and to unite different people. So that was a big deal for us, and I felt really privileged to be part of it. And then we came back in 1994 to do our first ever Europe Music Awards. And we decided to do it in East Berlin. And it was before Parisaplatz was built up, the embassies weren't there, so it was rubble, and one of our offices was in the former Stasi headquarters. And in 1994, we built the largest structure at that time, outdoor tent, facing the Brandenburg Gate from the east, and we had the curtains drawn. And George Michael comes up as the curtains are drawn from the stage with all the supermodels, and he sings "Freedom." So that was a pretty cool moment as well. And at that time, we realized that we had a chance to perhaps, it sounds corny, but to be a vehicle for culture exchange. And the Brandon Brigade, already being a symbol of unity, just fit in perfectly. Came back in 2009, lobbied Klaus Wowereit to let us go back to the Brandon Brigade, and he said, you know, if my U2 is my favorite band, if you get U2, I'll give you the gate. I got U2. So in 2009, on the 20th anniversary, we had U2 at the gate singing One, which One became the anthem over the years for HIV, but it was inspired by the wall coming down. Bono and Edge wrote One, actually in East Berlin, after the wall came down, and once again they sang it on the 20th anniversary, and then JC got up there and sang Sunday, Bloody Sunday with Bono. So all those dates, and I have that etched in my memory, 89, 94, and by the way, 94 at Berlin was the first time I had a date with my wife. So it's pretty cool to be back in Berlin. And you know, the final thing is that I gave Gorbachev, and Thomas was there, the Free Your Mind Award in 2009. And by the way, he still calls me Missile Man. And we both agreed that music can be more powerful than missiles. So for me, in Berlin, missiles became music, and the Iron Curtain became the red carpet, and the DMZ became MTV. All because of one creative decision made in the first 30 days that I was running the business. So decisions can make a difference, and I have my wife and 4 children as a side to also result in that decision. And yes, I have a piece of the wall. It's 2.5 tons. It's in a warehouse here. And I look forward to putting that somewhere in the world. But for me, it's a symbol, again, and a reminder of unity and freedom. And it's really quite meaningful. But, you know, with all that being said, you know, I think it's important to remember that MTV, and Michael, you mentioned this earlier, it's really defined by bringing meaningful, I think, very intelligent and thoughtful programming to the world. And we started with Beavis and Butthead. And that's gone to Jersey Shore. And you know, this is really thought-provoking, and I'm here to say I'm very proud. And in between Beavis and Butthead and Jersey Shore, we also brought Jackass. But we didn't just bring Jackass, we brought Jackass 3D. So, you know, we made progress in technology, and then, you know, throw in South Park in between, and you know, this is really something to be very proud of. So, we can't take ourselves too seriously. And yes, you know, the video, I'm reminded about a video, yes, I am a fraud. Now, one thing that I did enjoy over the years is trying to be a globalist, really, and trying to unite and connect people from different nations through media and diplomacy, which I have a natural interest for. So, yes, it's now the largest network of channels in the world, 200 channels. I say 200 countries, there's only 195 in the world, 20 different brands, and 2 billion people have access to our channels. I still say are also. And the most important part about all this, the key success factor, was what I call respect and reflect local cultures. Not one burger, not one cola, but actually changing the product depending on where you are. I like to say we were local before local was cool. Now a lot of companies try and do that, successfully I might add, but we pioneered it really in the late 80s. And I left MTV earlier this year, and you know, I left it to Bill Clinton to give me my first piece of advice, which was very valuable. He said, you know, now that you're retired, you can finally say whatever you want. That's the good news. The bad news is no one really cares what you say. So with that, as I look back on, you know, 22 years with MTV, 10 years with HBO, by the way, in domestic television. I was Bill, your cable guy, and another 11 years in the military. And I've been so lucky representing this brand that I've met over 30 heads of state, Nobel Peace Prize winners. I've had hour private meetings with Nelson Mandela, and I've brought Pamela Anderson to the Kremlin. I've had private meetings with the Dalai Lama, and I've also sat down with Bon Jovi. So it goes over a wide range, Akon to, oh, I don't know, presidents and even dictators, Fidel Castro. So the career really has been unconventional and unplanned and unpredictable. And or as my kids like to say, Daddy, that's so random. Uh, I must admit, it is random. But I think as I look back, the most important lesson in all this was the ability to adapt. And adaptability, I think, is the key going forward. And you have to be creative to adapt. And, you know, when I graduated from college, the things that defined my life didn't even exist. Cable TV didn't exist. MTV, HBO did not exist. Of course, Google, Facebook, and Twitter did not exist. The BRICS did not exist, emerging countries. The AIDS pandemic did not exist. And the internet itself did not exist. So, you know, I was reminded of all this when my youngest 7-year-old daughter, Tiger River, if you're looking for a name, by the way, we ran out, Moonbeam was already taken, came up to me and said about her sister, who's 15 years old, you know, Daddy, did you know that Noah, that's the 15-year-old, was born before the internet? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And it just struck me that in my 7-year-old's eyes, the 15-year-old is already out of it. She was born way before the internet, and it's already old. And, you know, I had children late, so I'm thinking my 15-year-old's pretty young. But what it means is the changes are so compressed. They're much more compressed than they ever have been. It's faster than we think. It's hyper. It's actually hyper connectivity and hyper change. Product life cycles are shorter. You know, HP, you all read about, yanked their tablet after, 90 days? So adaptability is really, really key, and I think creative is really key to be adaptable. Darwin said, you know, it's not about survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable. Churchill said, to improve is to change, and to be perfect is to change often. I quote Churchill a lot, by the way, because I have his flat in London. Now, I had to learn, just as another example of adapting, rap and hip hop when I was 55 years old. And that's not easy, I gotta tell you. I still haven't learned it. So in the interest of short attention span, which by the way was invented by MTV, not Twitter, I'm here to say, I've come up with a top 10 guiding principles, and these are principles I've tried to follow. So I'm gonna move through them really quickly. Number one, passion. You've heard a lot of these before, but you know, forgive me, they're tried and tested for me. Passion, love what you do what you love. Otherwise, you can't stand the stress. And you know, life is too short. At MTV, our mission would not have succeeded without passion. Charging the hill is much easier when you really want to charge the hill. Number two, go global, go local. And I've already mentioned respect and reflect local culture, this amazing array of diversity around the world. Got to take advantage of it, in product innovation especially. Yes, we went global with unifying themes, of course. We had music, a wop, bop, a loop, bop, a lop, bam, boom, means essentially the same thing in any language. U2, again, Bono said it, we are all one but different, we are all different but one. So yeah, those unifying themes are there more than they ever have been. But our whole driving force at MTV was really going local. Going local is really what set us apart. We had prayer time on our Muslim channels, we still do. We have MTV Pakistan, MTV Arabia, MTV Indonesia. We interpret Ramadan in a youthful way and call the prayer 5 times a day. In India, we play Bollywood. Some people thought it was too corny for MTV. It brings in the ratings. Bollywood in India. Dora the Explorer on Nickelodeon wears a burqa when she's in Arabia. So, you know, part of this is travel, and I would encourage everyone, I know you're already globalized and international, just do it. Travel is, I like to say, a cheap education with no homework. And you know, I also like to say, because flying is no fun nowadays, but hey, where else do you get 24-hour service and a great, great view? A room with a view. And you really have to be there. You have to be there with your feet on the soil and feel the culture. Not in a conference room, not in a hotel room, and not in the airport. You've got to get out. And it makes all the difference in the world. So, you know, after Haiti had the earthquake, I went to Haiti right away. We raised funds, Hope for Haiti Now, on MTV. We gave $15 million to a wonderful NGO called Partners in Health, and they're building a 320-bed hospital. Wasn't a pleasant trip, but I felt like I had to be there and see what it was like. Another example, the Forbidden City in China, trying to launch our business. Reminded me a little bit of Indiana Jones. because each of the cable operators from Mongolia would toast me a Maltai, which is, pure, even more alcohol than Clark had last night. And the last thing I remember is singing Butterfly and then standing up with 200 cable operators and say, "I regret that I have but one liver to give to my company." Going to Karachi right after Daniel Pearl, everyone said, "Don't do it. They're going to be targeting MTV." I did it, and it turned out to be the warmest reception I ever had launching MTV Pakistan. So I've always thought staying curious you'll never grow old. In learning, you'll never grow old. And again, Churchill, the most important thing about education is appetite. So all that to me has been a guiding force. Number 3, take risks, break the rules. And I love this one coming from West Point in the military. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. That was my guiding force at MTV. And innovation, I don't need to tell you this, innovation only comes with taking risk. And as you get on the business side as a CEO, it's not easy to take risks. But failure, I think, can actually teach more than success. So you learn from the mistakes, and don't be afraid. Particularly as a CEO now or as a manager on the business side, don't be afraid. Make the same sort of risk that you make on the creative side, and it'll pay off, I promise you. I wrestled with the deputy mayor of St. Petersburg, it was called Leningrad at the time, after arguing about the Cold War. And alcohol is a theme here, so forgive me. But it was a risky move. We were on the floor wrestling, but the next week we launched MTV in Leningrad, and he gave what I thought was the greatest toast I've ever seen, which was, "Here's to MTV, the latter-day Peter the Great, for opening up Russia to Europe as Peter the Great did 300 years earlier." And it became, I think, because we wrestled on the floor. I ran free Coke ads, didn't even tell Coca-Cola. I just put them on the air right away because they had high production value, and I knew that Pepsi was going to want to get on when they saw Coke. I told Muhtar Kent this a couple months ago, and he said, "Wow, I never knew that. I'm going to go get your book." I put condom instruction, not just, messages, how to put on a condom, primetime MTV. I got fined for it. It was taking a risk, but I still would do it again. So mistakes, endless mistakes. In China, they said, whatever you do, if you want to do business here, make sure you obey by the 3 T's. Of course, I said, what are the 3 T's? And they said, don't touch Tiananmen Square, don't touch Tibet, and don't touch Taiwan. Over the next 5 years, I did each one. So I became infamous, if you will, for doing apology tours to China. At one point, I even had to apologize on why the father of Kung Fu Panda was a duck, because that was one of our movies, Kung Fu Panda, and I had to explain why the father was a duck. If you want to succeed in China, you have to apologize a lot. Taiwan, another mistake. This localization was driving everything I did. I go to Taiwan, I wake up one morning, turn on MTV in the morning, and what do I see? Wrestling on MTV. All right, not too bad. It's nude wrestling. It's nude male wrestling. So I probably let localization and decentralization go too far. And then in China, another one in China, trying to close a deal, bringing my owner and CEO, Sumner Redstone, dining in the Great Hall of Peoples with the Premier of China, and hearing my boss lean over and tell the Premier of China, "Hey, I get much better Chinese food in New York." We still did the deal, but barely. Number 4, leadership. Leadership, first on the battlefield, last to leave. What's this mean? You're going to have crises every day, particularly as your job gets bigger. You got to be there with your people to help solve the crises. Quick to take blame, slow to take credit. That's counterintuitive in the business world, but you have to aspire to do that. And as illogical as it seems, I actually use my military principles quite a bit with MTV. I organized MTV like the military. And I know you can appreciate this, but when a company becomes large, bureaucracy is a killer. Policies are a creativity killer. And it really does stop innovation. So to fight that, I had small units around the world, no more than 50, 150 people. Everyone knew each other by a first name, defined their culture, and they were small, flexible, and nimble, which meant they could respond to the enemy, in this case the competition, right away without checking with the headquarters. And they knew the local population, or in this case, their consumers. So small units that I learned in the military, strangely, actually worked for me at MTV. And at MTV, you may not know this, but another sort of unwritten rule is, in charge of every channel, I put someone from the creative side. So the CEO or the MD of every MTV channel comes from the creative side. We were doing this 20 years ago. But I also put the COO underneath that CEO or MD from the business side. And they had to work as a team, and they brought different elements. Now you don't have to do that because you're going to be doing both. But I just thought that was an important message for a very creative unit like MTV. Number 5, hard work trumps talent. You know, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, even Mozart, they practice every single day, and it's all about execution. People, when I told my friends and colleagues that I took this job with MTV Europe, 23 years ago, they thought, hey, you're going to be hanging out in the south of France, you're going to be picking the VJs, you're going to be choosing the music, and you're going to be doing GTL with Snooki, and debating politics with Jon Stewart, and sunbathing with Shakira, or SpongeBob. And all that's not true. Well, at least the SpongeBob part is not true. But it was all about hard work, and it was all about execution, and that really is what I think made us successful more than anything else. Number 6, stand up for tolerance and diversity. Be bold, be brave. The world will test you. Hang with people who are different from you. It'll make you better. At MTV, we tried to make it a very diverse place to work, so I actually put Pakistanis and Indians right next to each other in the office. I put Turks and Greeks right next to each other. I put Israelis and Palestinians right next to each other. I even tried to put British and French next to each other. It didn't work. But, we didn't play it safe. We didn't say, yeah, I did fire Russell Brand, but hey, I also hired him to begin with. So, not playing it safe. Be diverse and be tolerant. Number 7, never accept no for an answer, and this is really one of my favorites. Again, Winston Churchill. Never give in. Never, never, never give in. And for me, it's the perfect quote, except I would have added a few more nevers. But for me, it just defines what you have to confront every day, because every day you'll have an obstacle, something that's going to try and stop you from doing something. And also Churchill, there's only one answer to defeat, and that's victory. Just pick yourself up and go. We had no's in Russia, we had no's in the Middle East, we had no's in China. And we ended up teaching a lot of our partners the difference between HR and sales, and we made them a lot of money. But we just persevered. And even when we weren't making money, we kept it going. And sometimes the corporate headquarters would say, you're not making money, get out. We just focused, and I raced to get to distribution, even in countries that didn't have an immediate return, never accepting no for an answer. If a hotel didn't carry MTV, I instructed everyone to check out immediately if they didn't put it in. Number 8, master digital. Master digital. The language, but you got to do it with a heart and soul. But I don't need to tell you all this. Facebook's now up to 800 million. One half of the 800 million use the service every single day, which is pretty extraordinary. Computer usage now equals TV time in most places of the world. In some countries, it's even ahead of TV, Brazil, South Korea. More than one half of computers are not sold now, are not computers, they're tablets. The smartphone will, prediction, eclipse the PC as the most important electronic device. Now, I used to say that, hey, we bring the world to your living room. Now we can say we bring the world to your pocket with the phone, a smartphone. I think learning digital is just as important as learning a language, even Mandarin. You got to speak the language of digital. Number 9, and this is probably the most important, and Julian, you alluded to it, have fun. Have fun and treasure relationships with your family and your friends. And you said probably one of the biggest things, best experiences I've had with the school is being with your friends. And those are friends that you're going to have, I predict, for your entire life. Nothing, when you're at the end, and you've heard this before, your friends and family, they're the only ones that love you. Maybe your dog and cat loves you, but they are the ones that only truly love you. So those are the relationships you really have to nurture. And then number 10. Number 10 is to make a difference, any difference. And with MTV, we had everything. We had climate change, we had knife violence, human trafficking is a big campaign, voting, smoking, ways to quit smoking, don't take drugs, don't drink, disaster relief quite a bit. For me, the big one was global health, and the entire company got behind HIV and AIDS. Why? Because HIV affected our audience more than any other demographic. And, these numbers are big, so forgive me, but this year is the 30th year of the epidemic. 60 million have been infected, 30 million have died, 30 million are living with HIV, 10 million are waiting for treatment, 370,000 babies in Africa are born with HIV. Had nothing to do with life choices, they're just born with HIV. Treatment has improved, but for everyone added to treatment, 2 get newly infected. So just by the arithmetic, it's out of control. The world's become a little complacent about it lately because there's been some good progress, but the fight really, really has to continue. And, it was risky for us because I wanted to put MTV right along the letters HIV, and partly to try and fight the stigma that's so insidious, because what the stigma does, it prevents us from getting tested, so a majority of carriers don't know. But that risk of putting MTV with HIV, I think made a difference. But there is complacency. We have to continue the fight. More recently, Michael, you mentioned it, I was in Bangladesh with Gavi, it's called, the Global Alliance of Vaccinations and Immunization. Bill and Melinda Gates' largest initiative. Over 10 years, they've saved 5.5 million lives with these vaccinations. It's quite extraordinary. Going forward, we just raised $4.3 billion in a tough economy, $4.3 billion primarily from donor governments to launch pneumococcal, which is essentially pneumonia. And these are vaccinations for below age 5. And rotavirus, which is essentially diarrhea. We all get rotavirus, but if you don't have access to health care right away, replenishment of fluids, if you're below 5, you die within 48 hours. There's a vaccination that prevents both. So we're rolling it out. 1.3 million children below 5 die every year of pneumonia, and 500,000 die from diarrhea, believe it or not. So these vaccinations hopefully will protect a lot more going forward, and we have a plan that'll save another 4 million by 2015. At the board meeting, we did field work. We also had a board meeting in Bangladesh, Dhaka, by the way, amazing city, 15 million. It's quite a juxtaposition of chaos and frenzy, but it works. So at the board meeting there, we decided to launch HPV vaccination. It's one of the few cancers that's formed by a virus. And you can actually prevent cervical cancer, which causes 275,000 deaths a year. Second largest killer, by the way, of women in the world. Not in the developed world, in the developing world. And it's second largest in the aggregate, but primarily in the developing world. We're going to launch HPV and vaccinate the 70 poorest countries, and we aim to save another 1 million lives over the next 3 years. So doing good, I've always maintained, is good for business. And I tell businesses, do it for your customers. If you're Coca-Cola in Africa, if you don't participate in the AIDS campaign, you're going to lose your customers. And then if you don't believe that, then do it for your employees, because they're going to feel better about coming to work every day, and they're going to feel like they're making a difference. If you don't believe any of that, do it for your brand, because I really truly believe doing good is good for business. So I was in South Africa over the summer, and I was Bishop Tutu, and we were in Robben Island, which is a very mystical place to meet, because that's where Nelson Mandela spent 23 of his 27 years in prison. And, he was telling me about the apartheid transition. He said, we could have done better. And then he paused, as only he can do, and he said, but we could have done much worse. And then he went on to say amazing things about the power of good. He's quite charismatic, Bishop Tutu. And yeah, there's a lot of bad in the world. Disasters and disease and wars, and there's a lot of bad. But there's a little more good than bad. And the power of good will outweigh the power of bad. And then he also talks about the unique power of young people. And, in many ways, young people are at their creative peak. Your definition of young, I suppose, can vary. We put the youngest people we could in charge of music playlists. And, as you now come into more management, I would encourage you never to forget the young. And you're young too, of course, but you're going to be managing young people, and that's where the power is, really, really power. And you have to empower them and encourage them to use their energy and adaptability and everything else they have. May sound a little strange, but use the youth wisely. And, again, it's easier to learn, I think, creativity. It's easier to learn to be a CEO as a creative person than the reverse. And that is really such a great advantage you have. So I actually think this school is pretty special. And everybody involved, from graduating to teaching to running it to the inspiration, working with the school, everybody should feel really pretty cool and definitely proud. And the only thing I would say is that being involved, especially if you're graduating, but really everybody, is a privilege. It really is a privilege to be involved with the Berlin School of Creative Leadership. And with this privilege comes responsibility. And I would just encourage, and you know this, I don't need to tell you this, but speak for those with less voice and speak for those with less opportunity as your opportunity and voice grows. And one more Churchill quote, sorry. Courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all others. So I stress courage to go with all the other skills you have. Combine it with the adaptability, combine it with leadership, combine it with now your new skills on the business side. But always remember, courage will carry the day. And if you combine all those, plus this wonderful creativity, the future is bright, even though the world has got lots of problems and challenges. The future is bright, and I am convinced that if you do all that, you will help make the world a better place. So with that, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bill, for this very encouraging but optimistic speech in so many areas where we have to perform. We love to hear that you loved Berlin, and here is a little something for you, some illumination that followed your satellite. Yeah? So we hope you like this. This is a wonderful book. Yeah, please. Yeah. We want to tell you from our heart that, Bill Clinton might not be right. Yeah? We love to hear what you say. Yeah? We do care what you say. And we hope we will have you again here in the Berlin School. Yeah? You made the difference in your business. We want to make it. We want to learn from you. And please come back.
Thank you.